Now, I want to ask you this. This doesn't directly involve you, but it involves Bruno, but I'd like to get your take and I suppose Bruno's as well through it. So, Bruno loses the title. We're talking late 70s, of course, to superstar Billy Graham. And then, and I don't know how involved you were in deciding this or throwing out suggestions, Bob Backlund then beats Billy. But there was one time where apparently Bruno and Billy almost took it upon themselves to not allow that to happen and to give the title back to Bruno. Do you remember any of this happening at the time?
Well, not really. I mean, in terms of what was going on with Bruno and Billy, because that would involve Vince McMahon Sr. at the time and what was going on in the office with the business at the top level. And I really didn't, wasn't involved with any of that or stick my nose in. The only thing about Backlund was, and he was a good guy, great athlete, but he couldn't follow Bruno. I mean, people thought he looked like Howdy Doody. After, 20 years of Bruno, when Bob Backlund came in with the belt, people would laugh at him. If he beat somebody in Madison Square Garden, God, the people would chant, bullshit, bullshit. In the time when fans would never do that. It just wasn't right. So, and the top guys knew it. And there's probably some guy saying, hey, look at Mr. McMahon. Bob Backlund is not drawing money. And if the top guy doesn't sell out a building, the wrestlers underneath the card, the opening bouts, they don't make as much money. So, and I think Vince knew Bob wasn't a big draw, and a lot of people thought, it was like Howdy Doody. But I think it had something to do with, for like almost 20 years, Bruno being the guy that was the one who called the shots. Was the one who said, okay, I'm going to wrestle a program with George Steele, we'll draw money, or I'll wrestle a program with Ivan Koloff. So I think by the time Bruno retired and quit, the McMahons wanted a puppet. They wanted to do their things, and they wanted somebody who, when they said jump, they would go, how high? And that's what Backlund was. He's kind of just a lucky guy, right place, right time. And again, a great guy, super athlete, but he just couldn't follow Bruno. But that's not really a big knock, because in those days, there really wasn't anybody that could follow Bruno. He was so over and big. The only guy that I thought might have had a chance at that time was Ken Patera, because you got a guy, 290 pounds, an Olympic gold medal winner, and Ken was big and believable and athletic, but that never happened. But there really wasn't anybody that could fill Bruno's shoes. And then later on, the era changed, and Hulk Hogan, became like the new era, but he was a big guy.
Yeah. He definitely, well, yeah, absolutely. Did you ever hear the suggestion that Steve Keirn may have been considered to be the champion after Billy?
Steve Keirn?
Apparently so. Apparently
I mean, there may have, but I don't remember it. And shortly after me and Bruno's big feud, 81 or so, I left the WWF for a while because I didn't want to get buried, but then I went to Japan. But I had to take a couple months off because for a year and a half, I worked my butt off, people trying to kill me. So I went to Japan, a couple tours. And because all the publicity came out of the New York, all the fans in the AWA and the NWA, knew about me. And it was a weird timing thing, because that was the time when the era was changing. The old school era was getting phased out. The days of the territories were numbered. They were going to disappear soon because of nationwide cable. So there wasn't going to be this territory or that territory. There was going to be one nationwide territory because of nationwide cable, and then the beginning of pay-per-view. And it was funny, unfortunately, Vince Sr. passed, but Vince Jr., the young new promoter on the block in those days, he was the one that saw the new era coming. where Vern Gagne, who was a millionaire and, from his territory, was, content doing what he did for, 20 years. And the Crockett's were content with their territory. But Vince was the one who saw the new era and was the one that took off. And then he wound up, where Hogan and Mean Gene and Bobby Heenan and Jesse and maybe some others went from the AWA to the WWF.
Dr. D.
And,
Dr. D, Dave Schultz as well. People never bring him up, but he was a big deal as well at the time.
Well, yeah, and then the NWA, you had Piper and Snuka and Steamboat and Macho, so Vince wound up taking everybody's top talent and giving them deals. That was the very start of the contract deals, but it left the other promoters hanging because they didn't see it coming. And they gave me an opportunity because the AWA needed somebody that people knew about, which was me. So I go to the AWA for a while. Then I'd come to the NWA for a while, do something with Dusty or someone. Then I'd go back to the AWA and do something, So I always went up and back because they needed me because the WWE was full of all the top guys that they took. So it just kind of worked out that way because I would have loved to have been in the WWE, but it just never worked out that way. But I did okay because the other territories needed me until finally the territories went under. But Ted Turner bought, and started the WCW. Mm-hmm. And they needed me, and I wound up there with a good deal.